Hello, true duelists, and welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! Single Card History, where I'm going to be talking about some of the cards that have impacted Yu-Gi-Oh! Throughout the years, and some of the other ones that didn't. Today's card, the Lady of the Burning Abyss, who's not technically part of the Burning Abyss. And oh yeah, a monster with one of the most broken effects in the game. It's Beatrice, Lady of the Eternal. See, that's not Burning Abyss. Beatrice was first released in the TCG in Premium Gold Infinite Gold as a gold secret rare as part of what I at the time called the You Can Now Afford to Play the Meta set. It wouldn't receive its first reprint until the 2020 Premium Gold Rare printing it received in Maximum Gold, and as of this video, its most recent print was in 2021's Brothers of Legends as an Ultra Rare. For time on the ban list, it was only at 3 for about 5 or so months in the TCG before it would be limited on the August 2016 ban list, whereas of this video it has been ever since. But if similar cards are anything to go by, that may change soon enough. A light attribute fairy type Xyz monster with 2500 attack and 2800 defense. The materials to summon it are any 2 level 6 monsters, and its effect reads: you can also Xyz summon this card by sending one Burning Abyss monster from your hand to the graveyard, then using one Dante monster you control as material. Transfer its materials to this card. If summoned this way, the following effect cannot be activated this turn. Once per turn, quick effect, you can detach one material from this card, send one card from your deck to the graveyard. If this card in your possession is destroyed by your opponent's card effect and sent to your graveyard, you can special summon one Burning Abyss monster from your extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions. First off, huge shoutouts to the original print, which had so many words they couldn't even put the materials on a different line of text as is standard for, Xyz monsters, but still, behold. The only time gay Dante was ever relevant, except for that one time at my first ever locals where the pro kid summoned it against me illegally by fusion summoning it using 2 copies of Dante, because a win's a win or something, or I'm bad at detecting misplays. So that's cool. In all reality, this card has been blessed with, or cursed with, depending on how you view it, one of the strongest effects in the game, the ability to send anything from the deck to the graveyard. That's an effect it shares with Lavalval Chain and Curious the Lightsworn Dominion, who, fun fact, are banned at the time I make this video. And when you're watching this, Beatrice might be banned as well, because that is an insanely strong effect. Taking a quick, and that's quick in quotations mind you, look at this card's history in the meta, it came out swinging in 2016 when we got this card imported from the OCG. Burning Abyss had fallen from the top tables for the most part due to the hits on the deck at the time, but coupling the deck with the then newer Phantom Knight cards and Beatrice allowed it to come right back into the limelight of the meta. One of 3 primary pillars of its format alongside Cosmo and extra deck Monarchs, the deck's pet name of PK Fire was a strong deck and also the last truly clever name for any deck in the TCG that we've had since. Able to use things like Terratop and Takatomborg to make 1-card Dantes without using the normal summon, it could make easy use of a small Phantom Knight engine as well to better use the card's milled. And of course, things like Break Sword for a Scrap Dragon-esque effect to help clear boards made PK Fire a very annoying and effective deck. And most important to this video, any and all Dantes could become Beatrice with any Burning Abyss monster in hand, which served as a very solid wall with a strong floating effect to help deter the opponent from removing it with card effects like Dark Destroyers, on top of the other more active and effective uses that it had. For starters, being able to send any Burning Abyss monster meant Beatrice could turn any of their effects into quick effects of sorts, provided that the chain would resolve as you'd want it to. Burning Abyss monsters like Farfa could remove monsters to disrupt an opponent's turn by either removing the material to stop an extra deck summon, such as the second same level monster or a tuner, or just removing a stronger monster to help let you deal with it on your own turn and prevent them from attacking you on theirs. Or sending Calcab in the end phase could help remove back row, and Alec could negate a monster effect, the catch being it couldn't negate an effect that is activating on a chain. So for example, if the opponent summoned Tour Guide and you were to chain Beatrice and send Alec, the chain would resolve backwards so that Alec would hit the graveyard, and then Tour Guide would summon a monster from the deck, and then on a new chain, Alec would activate to negate a monster effect. So it wasn't as good as, say, Effect Veiler or more modernly an Imperm back in the day, but to shut down a continuous effect it was still solid, like chaining Beatrice to make sure that you negated the opponent's Vanity's Fiend, or maybe chaining it to the activation of Mask Change, so that when the opponent did end up summoning Dark Law, you could already have a Alec in the graveyard to negate Dark Law's effects on the new chain. Something more like that. It could of course also send a Phantom Knight trap card to use their Monster Reborn effect of the traps as well, and who could forget the Eternal Barbar for game, which made it a very strong and versatile monster in Burning Abyss decks, on top of the fact that it was a reliable float to play against in the pretty popular and common Cosmo matchup. And of course it was played in the more pure BA decks as well that were around at the time, because why wouldn't they? In general, this kept it to just using it to send Burning Abyss monsters to disrupt the board with no bonus PK shenanigans, and the build was ultimately less popular and powerful than PK Fire was at events, but it was still played in abundance. And funny enough, one of the other best decks of the format would play it pretty often as well. Extra Deck Monarchs would include it in theirs simply because it was possible for them to make it. It wasn't all too common, needing 2 copies of Kuraz the Light Monarch on board to summon it, but if they ever ended up with 2 Kuraz, it was an easy target, letting the Monarch player send any Monarch spell or trap that they might need. Sending Pantheism let them get an additional search. Sending Prime Monarch could be used to make Yule to summon it on the fields for tribute fodder or to use as a material for an Xyz summon, and sending any other Monarch spell or trap could simply be Yule to summon out Prime. And of course they could also send Erebus to get a Monarch back into play using Erebus's graveyard effect. Hell, they could even send Super Quantal Red Layer and use its effect to get back a separate Super Quantal Red Layer. They would almost never ever do that, but they could. Due to the card's prominence, it also became a very popular Cherries target in this time due to its strength in PK Fire and BA decks in general. So shoutouts to the assholes playing things like Cleafort in this format. You have been remembered in this video. This was the case up to and through the World Championship qualifier season in 2016, and then because of the unique Worlds ban list, Blue Eyes won that format, so just always feel like bringing that up. Still wild to me to this day. And then after that, Beatrice got hit because it's kind of an insane card to have multiple copies of in play. It can be a negate, banish, a burn, and that's only in the context of Burning Abyss monsters. The lack of a hard once per turn meant that not only could more than one be summoned in Burning Abyss, but you could have to be playing around 2 of those effects, and that gets a little wild in the grand scheme, or at the very least Konami thinks so, since it's been limited for 8 years as I make this video. But with its limit and other new cards such as the Zodiac monsters and the ever more powerful meta, Burning Abyss decks did ultimately fall out of favor, but that's not the end for this card. A deck like Dark Synchro would play it, as the lone Xyz monster often enough, because fun fact, you can send anything to the graveyard with this, and if you summon it properly instead of by using a Dante, you can use its effect right away. So you could send any combo piece you wanted or that you were missing if you had the means to make it. And with things like Armageddon Knight and Dark Grepher to reliably send Destiny Hero Malicious, that wasn't too hard to do. Hell, they're even level 4, so if you were to use them in say a level 2 tuner like Plague Spreader or Red Resonator, you could make Coral Dragon alongside the Malicious if need be. That maybe wasn't always the most common thing to do, but seeing as how Beatrice could be used to get you things like Glow Up Bulb, Jet Synchron, Plague Spreader, and of course the oh-so-abusable Level Eater, that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was a toolbox tool to set up combos in the obnoxiously comboed deck, and for that it was very solid, and as mentioned, the only Xyz they needed to play. It did stick around in Burning Abyss variants though, showing up in just about anything that played Dante. Some people would play a small Zodiac engine in their BA deck since the deck had no trouble making rank 3s, and MX Saber Invoker could easily get your Zoo engine, while Dante could be used to make your Beatrice plays, which was cute. Infernoid BA decks were popular since Grave decks love to pair with Grave decks, and Beatrice could be used to send the tried and true Burning Abyss for their disruption plays, or used to send Infernoids to fuel your Infernoid summons. Burning Abyss was also home to Sekka's Light and its variants for a while, since Monster Spam Wombo Combo works well with BAs. You just vomit them onto the board with their in-hand special summon effect, make Dante to get your mills for any grave shenanigans, and then make Beatrice afterwards for more fun. There's also Orcust variants I found, because fuck it, BA players are just addicts and they'll throw these cards in any and everything. And it was notable because you could be using it to get, Orcust effects, right? Just mill Symbol Skeleton and Harp Horror, call it a day, forehead. Beatrice could do that for you if your Dante didn't. I mean, I even found a Dino BA deck, which I don't know entirely what it's doing. Beatrice send Baby? Beatrice send any dinosaur hard summon UCT? I don't know, dude. You could find 23 variants and put them on the screen, and some jackass will come flying in that you neglected to mention their Burning Abyss digital bug deck and act like you are the one who's out of line. BA is a popular deck, and so long as Beatrice is legal to be played in it, it will continue to show up. Oh, and of course, Block Dragon Burning Abyss. I don't know how distinct this is from Sekka's Burning Abyss in practice, but They used block before the miners did, so that's cool. The next non-BA deck I find that used it was none other than Virtual World. 369 access deck was known for manipulating levels between those three numbers, and making rank 6s was no trouble. So by making Beatrice, they could say send Chuche to manipulate levels to make more plays, or send Qinglong to get the Rhoda effect, or any other foolish effect they might want. I also know some people were true sadists, and would use Beatrice to send a copy of Artifact Scythe to the grave, then use the effect of Dragonlark Parian? Not giving that a second try, to bring out the Scythe on the opponent's turn so they could Scythe lock the opponent in that way. This was the deck that was best known for playing VFD, and seeing that it also did shit like this has confirmed that VW players were never loved as children, and nothing could convince me otherwise. Beatrice would similarly show up in Drytron, another variety of no-dot deck that showed up in the early 2020s. This deck could make Beatrice in a much more funky way, since they could ritual summon a Cyber Angel monster to use as material, and that's cool. They would use a copy of Herald of the Diviner to send a Herald of the Arclight from the extra deck to the grave, netting not only a ritual search, but also making Diviner level 6 to use as material for Beatrice. It was incredibly common to use Beatrice to send a copy of Ava from deck to grave to get more searches of level 2 fairies to your hand to use as fodder for Herald of Ultimateness. And that was pretty much the sole function of the card, in all honesty, although it could also send any Drytron name you might be lacking otherwise, or the full disrespect Beatrice send Nibiru. Again, a play that's far more doable than it is practical. At the time I recorded the TCG, its last home was in Tearlament decks, particularly once Bestials dropped in Darkwing Blast. Bestials, being level 6 monsters that could banish opponents' light or dark monsters to summon themselves, were incredibly powerful in the Tearlament mirror, especially since their quick effects if the opponent has a monster. And being level 6 meant it was easy fodder to summon Beatrice with, allowing players to send any Tearlament monster to the grave to get a fusion summon, or any material to the grave to make a Tearlament fusion summon with, such as, say, King of the Swamp or anything else you might want to fuse with. This stayed true and really only got better with the release of the Ishizu cards. Not only did Beatrice gain more things to send to the grave with both the Millers and the Shufflers to let you make and disrupt the opponent's plays, but Bestials became effectively mandatory in the Tier 0 format, meaning more level 6s to make Beatrice with. It was one extra layer of play and potential disruption in a format with mirror matches infamous for countless layers of play and potential disruption. With the banning and limiting of the majority of the deck that is Ishizu Tearlaments, Tearlament fell from the dominant position, but Beatrice has remained a staple in Tearlaments to this day, because gambling is fun and the mills just don't stop. Plus, Militias went to 3 and Bestials are still great, so it's not any harder to make per se. Which brings us to today. Although as I speak, we're still about a month and a half away from the TCG release of the Infinite Forbidden, and the level 6 Fiend engine translated as Fiendsmith. So it'll be really funny if the official name for that deck in the TCG is like Mean Guys or something, because I'm sitting here saying Fiendsmith, but whatever. It's an engine that is incredibly splashable, and one that has a very easy time getting 2 level 6 monsters on board, with no sorts of locks or restrictions. Which means Beatrice is making its way back into the spotlight in countless decks, and back into the inevitable banning discussion. Because as I mentioned, there are 2 other extra deck monsters that can send any card from the deck to the grave, and they're both banned. Being able to send anything to the graveyard has and will be a problem in the grand scheme of the game. There are far more decks with cards that they want in the grave to either use grave effects or occur from the graveyard than there are decks that don't interact with the grave at all. And if you want proof of that, argue that Dimension Shifter is a fine card online. Lord knows Beatrice has been used in plenty of FTK decks, and not unlike Curious on the Volleyball Chain before it, it's a card and an effect that has just been abused far too many times to meaningfully list in a single video. As I said, the lack of a hard once per turn, and its very lax summoning materials, all things considered, make for a problem that's waiting to happen. Like with the probably not named Fiendsmith with the level 6 Fiends coming from the Infinite Forbidden. Overall, Beatrice is a very powerful and very abusable monster. Sending any card from the deck to the grave is an effect that has been banned twice as I'm speaking, and in all likelihood, 3 times at the time you're watching this, assuming you're watching in like 2025 or later, or at least that's my prediction. In its native deck, it's pretty cool, with a variety of effects from Farfa to Alec to Barbar for means of disruption, and in other decks, it's just added consistency on command by getting you whatever you want in the grave. But it's an FTK tool, and again, if Curious and the Volleyball are bannable, so is Beatrice, so I don't think I'll miss it too much if/when it ends up on the ban list. And so that's our look at Yu-Gi-Oh! Single card history, Beatrice, Lady of the Eternal. Stay tuned for our next video, and feel free to suggest some cards to review or what type of video you'd like to see. Don't forget to like, and as always, subscribe to YGO Strats to impress your smoking Italian wife, and so that you too can be a true duelist.